My name is Sarah Mitchell, and after 10 years as a senior financial analyst at Global Innovations Corp, I learned that sometimes the biggest threats to a company don't come from outside competitors. They come from the people signing the checks. I still remember my first day at GIC, fresh from getting my CPA, eager to prove myself in one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country. Back then, Reynolds had just been appointed as CFO, bringing with him an impressive track record of financial growth from various Fortune 500 companies. The key to success in corporate finance, Marcus told me during my first performance review, is knowing which questions not to ask. I should have recognized that red flag, but I was too focused on learning from his supposed expertise. For 8 years, everything seemed perfect. Our quarterly reports showed consistent growth, our stock price kept climbing, and Marcus was hailed as a financial genius. I worked my way up from junior analyst to senior financial manager, earning a reputation for attention to detail that would eventually save my career and expose a massive fraud. The first hint that something was wrong came during our Q3 review last year. I was reconciling our international subsidiary accounts when I noticed subtle discrepancies in the transfer pricing documentation. Small amounts, skillfully hidden in thousands of legitimate transactions, but they didn't quite add up. "You're being too thorough, Sarah," Marcus said when I brought it to his attention. "These international accounts are complex. Some irregularities are normal." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I began keeping detailed records of every suspicious transaction, storing copies of documentation on a secure private server, not because I suspected fraud yet, just because it was my job to be thorough. Then came the Asian expansion project. GIC was planning to acquire 3 tech companies in Singapore, and I was assigned to conduct the financial due diligence. That's when I found it. A pattern of systematic fraud, hidden in plain sight. Marcus had created a brilliant scheme. He was using our international acquisitions to hide massive financial manipulations. Money would flow through multiple subsidiaries, getting lost in a maze of transactions before disappearing into offshore accounts. The amounts were staggering. Over $100 million siphoned off over 5 years. I spent 2 weeks documenting everything, cross-referencing transactions, building an airtight case. I knew I had to report it to the board, but I needed to be certain. One mistake could ruin careers, including mine. The night before I planned to present my findings, I received an urgent email from Marcus requesting an early morning meeting. Walking into his office at 7 a.m., I knew something was wrong. 2 security guards stood by his desk, and Janet from HR sat in the corner, her expression carefully neutral. "We've discovered some disturbing information, Sarah," Marcus began, his voice cold. "It seems you've been manipulating our financial records quite extensively." My blood froze as he slid a folder across his desk. Inside were transaction records, modified to make it appear that I had been the one orchestrating the fraud. My signatures had been forged on key documents, timestamps altered, approval chains rearranged. "The evidence is quite clear," Marcus continued. "You've been using your position to hide fraudulent transactions. The board has been notified." I looked at the forged documents, mind racing. He had planned this perfectly, using my own attention to detail against me. Every transaction I had investigated had been doctored to implicate me instead. "Clean out your desk," he ordered, smirking slightly. "Security will escort you out. And Sarah, I'd avoid talking to anyone about this. Fraud charges can lead to serious prison time." I stood there, years of work and reputation crumbling around me. But as I looked at Marcus's smug face, something inside me calmed. He thought he had won. He thought he had destroyed all evidence of his crimes. He hadn't. What Marcus didn't know was that I had learned more than just accounting during my years at GIC. I had learned how digital forensics worked, how to create undeniable audit trails, and most importantly, how to protect truth in a way that no one could erase. As security escorted me out, I heard Marcus already on the phone. Yes, we caught it in time. The acquisition review can proceed as planned. I smiled slightly, thinking about the external auditors who would arrive next week to review the acquisition. They would find something interesting in their review, something that would make them dig deeper than Marcus ever expected. Because sometimes the best defense isn't fighting back immediately. Sometimes it's letting your enemies think they've won while the evidence they didn't know about slowly comes to light. Marcus thought he had buried the truth under forged documents and false accusations. What he didn't know was that the real evidence was already safely documented, time-stamped, and waiting to be discovered by people he couldn't control. The forensic audit team would arrive in exactly 7 days, and they were about to find the biggest financial fraud case of the decade. Part 2. The preparation. The first thing I did after being escorted out wasn't call a lawyer. Instead, I drove to a small cyber cafe 2 towns over and accessed my secure private server. Marcus had surely seized my work computer, but he didn't know about my personal backup system. "They're doing a complete audit of your department," messaged Tom from it, a friend who had helped me set up my secure documentation system months ago. "Reynolds is having everything scrubbed." Of course he was. But what Marcus didn't understand about modern forensic accounting was that every attempt to hide evidence creates new evidence. From my secure location, I watched through encrypted logs as Marcus's team combed through company servers, methodically altering records. Each change they made was automatically documented by the hidden protocols I'd put in place. My apartment became my war room. 3 laptops displayed different aspects of my counter strategy. Screen 1. The official GIC financial records being systematically altered by Marcus's team. Screen 2. My secured backup records showing the original transactions. Screen 3. A real-time log of every change they were making, each one strengthening my case. The external auditors are from Anderson and Price. Messaged Lisa from the finance department. She'd been my mentor when I started and knew something was wrong. Top forensic team. Reynolds is trying to rush them through before the acquisition. Perfect. Anderson and Price had a reputation for being thorough. They wouldn't be rushed. 2 weeks after my firing, Marcus made his first major mistake. In his hurry to cover the money trail, he authorized a series of correcting entries that contradicted previous quarterly statements. Getting questions from the SEC about revised filings, Lisa reported, "The changes aren't matching up with the original submissions." I smiled, watching the discrepancies multiply. In financial fraud, it's not the original crime that usually exposes you, it's the cover-up. Then came an unexpected ally. James from the Singapore office reached out to a secure channel. "Those acquisition targets you were investigating," he wrote, "2 of them are shell companies. Just empty offices and paperwork. I've got photos and documentation." I thanked him but warned him to stay quiet. The forensic audit would need to discover this independently to be credible. 3 weeks in, signs of Marcus's growing desperation started showing. The auditors were asking too many questions, digging too deep into the international transactions. "Sarah," his email read, "perhaps we acted hastily. Would you consider consulting on some historical reconciliations? For appropriate compensation, of course." I didn't respond. A few days later, another email arrived offering a generous settlement, in exchange for signing some backdated documents. His nervousness was showing. The auditors must have found something. They're working through weekends now, Lisa reported. Marcus has the team recreating transaction histories, but the numbers aren't adding up. Can't make the cash flows balance. Of course they couldn't. International transfers have too many independent verification points. Change one record, and you have to change hundreds of others to maintain consistency. 1 week before the acquisition deadline, I received an urgent message from David, our external counsel, who'd quit after my firing. "You need to see this," he wrote, attaching internal memos. "They're planning to pin everything on you." Created a whole paper trail of forged authorizations. I checked my secure logs. Every document they forged, every alteration they made, was being independently recorded and timestamped. The truth was growing stronger with every lie. The final week was intense. Marcus's team worked around the clock, trying to patch holes in a fictional narrative. Each fix only created new discrepancies. The auditors found the Singapore shell companies, Lisa messaged. They're expanding the scope of their investigation. Marcus is furious. His final attempt to reach me came through my old supervisor. "Whatever you think you have, it won't matter. Take the settlement. Walk away." I sent back one reply, looking forward to the audit findings. The night before the auditor's final presentation to the board, I checked my documentation one last time. Original transaction records, secured and verified, forged document trail, fully documented, alteration timestamps, all logged, Singapore evidence, independently verified, cash flow discrepancies, clearly highlighted. "You really think this will work?" Tom messaged. "They've got the board convinced you're the criminal." "That's the beauty of forensic accounting," I replied. "Numbers don't lie, even when people do." I went to bed that night feeling strangely calm. Tomorrow, in front of the board and the SEC observers, Marcus would learn why you should never frame a financial analyst who understands digital forensics. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Lisa. Auditors called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. Marcus doesn't know what they found. But I did, and tomorrow, everyone else would too. Part 3. The Revelation. The morning of the audit presentation, Global Innovations headquarters was unusually quiet. Through my sources, I learned that the Anderson and Price team had requested a closed-door session with the full board and SEC representatives. Marcus had no choice but to agree, though he insisted on presenting his version of events first. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, standing confidently at the head of the boardroom. "Before the audit team presents their findings, I want to address the unfortunate situation that led to this review." I watched through Lisa's secure feed as Marcus launched into his carefully prepared narrative. "As you know, we recently discovered significant financial irregularities," he continued. "Thanks to our internal controls, we identified the responsible party, a trusted employee who abused her position." The boardroom door opened, interrupting his speech. Catherine Wong, lead forensic auditor from Anderson and Price, walked in flanked by 2 SEC investigators. "Mr. Reynolds," Catherine said calmly, "I believe we should proceed directly to our findings." Marcus's smile flickered. This wasn't part of his plan. "Of course," he said smoothly, taking a seat. "Though I think you'll find our internal investigation has been quite thorough." "Indeed," Catherine replied, connecting her laptop to the presentation system. "Let's begin with those internal investigations." The screens came to life, displaying a complex timeline of transactions. "What you're about to see," Catherine announced, is one of the most sophisticated financial fraud schemes we've encountered, and its revelation comes thanks to one of the most detailed forensic documentation trails I've ever seen. Marcus shifted uncomfortably as Catherine began her presentation. First, let's examine the official records, she said, pulling up GIC's books. According to these, Sarah Mitchell orchestrated a complex fraud scheme. However, the screen split, showing parallel transaction records. These are the original records, preserved through independent blockchain verification. Notice the timestamps, digital signatures, and authentication chains. The board members leaned forward, studying the discrepancies. Every alteration made to company records over the past month was automatically logged. Catherine continued. Each attempt to hide the original fraud created new evidence of deliberate manipulation. She clicked through a series of slides, revealing the full scope of Marcus's scheme. Shell companies in Singapore with no actual operations. Transfer pricing manipulations hiding money movements. Forged approvals with impossible timestamps. Backdated documents contradicting official filings. But the most damning evidence, Catherine said, comes from the very attempt to frame Ms. Mitchell. The screens show a detailed analysis of the forged documents used against me. These forgeries contained a fatal flaw, Catherine explained. They used digital signatures generated after Ms. Mitchell's system access was revoked. In other words, these documents could only have been created by someone with CFO-level authorization. Marcus stood up abruptly. This is speculation. Actually, one of the SEC investigators cut in. It's evidence, and there's more. The next hour was a methodical destruction of Marcus's entire fraud scheme. Every transaction, every forgery, every attempt at cover-up was exposed in precise detail. In total, Catherine concluded, we've documented $127.3 million in fraudulent transactions over 6 years. The attempt to frame Ms. Mitchell appears to have been triggered by her discovery of the Singapore shell companies. The board chairman looked physically ill. And the acquisition targets? Fake, Catherine confirmed. Empty offices and paid actors. The acquisition was meant to hide the money trail permanently. Marcus tried one last time. These are just technical glitches. These are federal crimes. The SEC investigator interrupted. Mr. Reynolds, I suggest you contact your attorney immediately. What happened next was a blur of activity. Security arrived to escort Marcus out. The SEC investigators began sealing off financial records. The acquisition was immediately halted. By evening, I received a call from the board chairman himself. Ms. Mitchell, he said, sounding exhausted, we owe you an enormous apology and a debt of gratitude. Would you be willing to meet tomorrow to discuss returning to GIC? We need someone with your skills to help clean up this mess. I had a better offer in mind. 1 year later, I'm no longer just a financial analyst. I'm the youngest CFO in GIC's history, leading a completely restructured finance department. The systems I designed to catch Marcus's fraud have become standard practice across the industry. Marcus? He's facing 20 years in federal prison. Turns out we weren't his first target, just the first one who kept better records than he did. Sometimes late at night, reviewing audit reports in my new office, Marcus's old office, I think about that final board meeting, about his face when he realized what had happened. He thought he was framing an ordinary analyst, but what he really did was trigger the most sophisticated forensic trap ever created. The irony, if he'd been honest, I would have helped him improve our financial systems legitimately. But he chose fraud, Forgetting the first rule of modern finance, in a digital world, the truth leaves traces that cannot be erased. These days, when I speak at accounting conferences, someone always asks about the case. They want to know if I planned it all from the beginning. I just smile and tell them what I've learned. In finance, the best defense isn't just following rules. It's creating systems where truth can always be verified. Because sometimes, the quiet analyst in the corner office isn't just checking numbers. Sometimes, they're building a shield to protect the entire company from those who would destroy it from within. GIC recovered, stronger than before. Our stock price has doubled since the fraud was exposed, built on a foundation of genuine growth and absolute transparency. Every quarter, when I present our financial results, I remember what my father, also an accountant, always told me. Numbers tell stories, Sarah. Make sure yours tells the truth. Thanks to modern forensic accounting and careful documentation, my story told the truth louder than any lie Marcus could create. And that's a balance sheet I'm proud to stand behind.